Hello, my name is Jeremy Sims, and I really enjoy studying the Bible, kind of finding some things I've never seen before in it, and then sharing it with other people. So that's what I'm doing here. Here recently, as I've been going through the book of Jeremiah, I've been doing two videos for every section. One is a short and sweet version, and one is a long and detailed version, just depending on what it is that you want. So this is the short and sweet version. If you want more details, that's also out there if you want to look that up on my channel. So, we've been going through Jeremiah. Today we're going to do Jeremiah chapter 5, verses 1 through 13. And in this section, we see some stuff that I think actually parallels the situation in the United States quite a bit on a lot of levels. And I'll kind of point some of those out as we go. To catch up on where we are in the book of Jeremiah, Jeremiah is a prophet that is delivering a message of kind of doom and judgment that's coming to Judah, saying, repent, 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 but they're not being very repentful. In the last section, we talked about the latter half of Jeremiah chapter 4. We really got to see something special and fairly unique in the Bible. I can't think of another example of it. And what we really saw was God and Jeremiah both kind of grieving together about the judgment and doom that was coming upon the people. It was just kind of a sad moment of them going back and forth, expressing themselves. Anyway, that leads us into today's. So let's start looking at it. Do Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 1. Run to and fro through the streets of Jerusalem. Look and take note. Search your squares to see if you can find a man, one who does justice and seeks truth, that I may pardon her. Though they say, as the Lord lives, yet they swear falsely. O Lord, do not your eyes look for truth? You have struck them down, but they felt no anguish. You have consumed them, but they refused to take correction. They have made their faces harder than rock. They have refused to repent. So many things here. I wish I had time to talk about it much longer, but this is short and sweet, so we got to move through it quick. Run to and fro through the streets of Jerusalem. Look and take note. So God gives them Jeremiah an assignment, and says, go through Jerusalem, which is the capital city, and see if you can find anybody. Just find one man. Search your squares, see if you can find a man, one who does justice and seeks truth. Just one who is actually looking for justice and truth. Something you would hope would be common, but apparently is not too common. We see this is kind of paralleling, if you're familiar with the story of Lot and the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's sort of that same sort of thing when Abraham talked to God and said, hey, you wouldn't judge, you'd spare a city for just 10, right? And God's like, sure, and he couldn't even find 10 people in Sodom and Gomorrah, so he ended up getting destroyed. Seems to be the same thing here, only God's saying, just give me one, find one. Though they say, but clearly the implication is here he can't find one. Though they say, as the Lord lives, yet they swear falsely. So there's this idea of, as the Lord lives, which seems to be an expression that's, it's not just an expression, but like a swearing, as if they are promising and tying what they're doing to what God does. Like, I swear this is true, and they're kind of, when they're swearing something is true, the idea seems to be that they're like tying their belief to God and their trust in God to whatever is they're swearing. But God's saying they're all swearing falsely. None of them actually mean what they're saying. It's just an empty expression to them. O Lord, do not your eyes look for truth, which if you just want to have something to kind of meditate on, that's something worth thinking about all by itself. O Lord, do not your eyes look for truth. You have struck them down, but they felt no anguish. You have consumed them, but they have refused to take correction. The way ESV translates it here, I think, is a little weird, but what it's saying is, you've disciplined them, you've struck them, but they felt no anguish. It's like they refused to feel the pain of that. You've consumed them. It's kind of a weird translation there, but it's like, again, you're doing stuff to make them feel the pain, and yet they don't take the correction, like a stubborn child. They have made their faces harder than a rock. They refuse to repent. They just had that resistant spirit to them. Verse 4 and 5. Then I said, these are only the poor, they have no sense, for they do not know the way of the Lord, the justice of their God. I will go to the great, and will speak to them, for they know the way of the Lord, the justice of their God. But they all alike had broken the yoke. They had burst the bonds. We see something very politically incorrect here. This idea that, he goes to the poor first, but Jeremiah concludes they have no sense. They don't know right from wrong, They don't know the way of the Lord, the justice of their God. So some people, this might rub people the wrong way. I think there's a lot of stuff you could say about this. I think maybe the implication here is that you would hope that those who were more knowledgeable and doing well would be the people who were following God, that those that were doing better in society would be those that society is lifting up, would be those that are walking more closely with the Lord. But clearly that's not what was happening here. There's other ways to take that, but that's kind of my reading on it. I will go to the great and speak to them, for they know the way of their Lord. And part of it might be like their educational opportunities. Maybe everybody had a little bit of opportunity to learn from synagogue or whatever they were doing at the time. But, the rich, they have more resources, they have more time, they probably have better education. Surely they know what's right. But it concludes, they all alike had broken the yoke, they had burst the bonds. And this is a reference to cattle. If they were going to be plowing a field, whatever, you'd put them in a yoke, which is that thing they pull against to pull the plow. And God's saying, every one of them had burst the bonds. It's like they had broken free from that. They were not following the dictates of the Old Testament covenant, the Mosaic covenant. They were not following after God at all. God had wanted them to serve for a particular purpose, and they were not serving that purpose. They had become useless. Verse 6, therefore a lion from the forest shall strike them down. A wolf from the desert shall devastate them. A leopard is watching their cities. Everyone who goes out of them shall be torn in pieces, because their transgressions are many, their apostasies are great. So we see all these predator-type metaphors of what's going to happen to these people, and this seems to tie in nicely to the last verse, where he had talked about Judah as being like a cattle had broken forth of its bonds, but then it's like it's wandering outside the city, and immediately upon leaving the city, disaster is coming upon them, that judgment is coming. The predators are waiting for them to consume them, because their transgressions are many, their apostasies are great. It's going to tear them apart. The transgressions is, it could be referring to any breaking of the law, any sort of sin, but apostasies is specifically giving up their faith, turning away from who their God is on a fundamental level. And I said I was going to point out some things that parallel the United States, and I haven't so far, but you look at this in the way that they won't take correction. I feel like God has given us many opportunities to have correction, and yet we aren't taking that. We say, as the Lord lives, but do we mean that? Is that something we actually mean? We might swear about how much we love the God, but is any of that true? Do we really seek justice and truth? I'd say a truth teller is pretty hard to find these days. Poor and great alike seem to have very little regard for God. Anyway, moving on, verses 7 through 9. How can I pardon you? Your children have forsaken me. They have sworn by those who are no gods. When I fed them to the full, they committed adultery and trooped to the houses of whores. They were well-fed, lusty stallions, each neighing for his neighbor's wife. Shall I not punish them for these things, declares the Lord? And shall I not avenge myself on a nation such as this? So he's saying almost like, I want to pardon you. I wish I could, but I can't. You're not giving me any room to. You're doing these horrible things. Your children have forsaken me, have sworn by those that are no gods. They were pledging their loyalty to other false gods, and these false gods were demanding horrible things of them. They were lustful and vengeful and murderous. When I fed them to the full, they committed adultery. So catch what God's saying here. He's saying, I fed you to the full, in the sense of, you were full, you were satisfied, and then you went after the other gods anyway. They committed spiritual adultery, which is something Jeremiah speaks to quite frequently, but then it seems to be talking about physical adultery here too. They were well-fed, lusty stallions, which is a funny metaphor, each neighing for his neighbor's wife. Such a funny way to put that, but we see this idea that they were satisfied, they had everything they need, and yet they were looking for other things. They were looking for things that were outside what was given to them, what is appropriate for them. They were looking for their neighbor's things, and I think there's a lot to be said about this, of being satisfied and yet, or should have been satisfied. You have everything you need and let you constantly want more. Something sinful about that enviousness and that greed, that thinking you deserve something more. Shall I not punish them for these things? Again, he's like, I can't ignore this stuff. I think the use of the troop to the houses of whores, we can clearly should be able to see the sexual lust that is in our society. It's everywhere. We can't escape it. People think that it's okay to act out on all your sexual desires when the Bible teaches just the opposite. Our whole society in many ways seems to be trooping to the houses of whores. Shall I not punish them for these things, declares the Lord, and shall not I avenge myself on nations such as this? It's interesting that he uses the word avenge, because that's not just like punishment and justice, but it's also almost a personal level of like, this isn't a personal affront to me, and I'm, in a way, going to get my pound of flesh back from you. I'm not going to ignore this. It's got that idea of vengeance in there. Verses 10 through 13. Go up, go up through her vine rows and destroy, but make not a full end. Strip away her branches, for they are not the Lord's. For the house of Israel and the house of Judah have been utterly treacherous to me, declares the Lord. They have spoken falsely of the Lord, and have said, He will do nothing. No disaster will come upon us, nor shall we see sword or famine. The prophets will become wind. The word is not in them. Thus shall it be done to them. A lot here too. Go up through her vine rows and destroy, but make not a full end. There are several times in the Bible where they use the idea of a vineyard. If that's not clear, it's speaking of a vineyard here. Vine rows being the little fences essentially that the vines would grow upon in vineyards. It says, go in there and destroy them, make not a full end. There are several places where the Bible uses this vineyard metaphor. I actually have not brushed up on them as much as I should have, but there's some parallels to look at there. If you're watching this video, you've probably heard some of those before. Jesus uses this sort of metaphor. I believe one of the other major prophets did. I want to say Isaiah. I'm not sure if that's true. So there's, if you want some comparisons, there's probably some worthwhile stuff to look at there. Strip away your branches, for they are not the Lord. So if, I'm not a gardener, but as I understand, if you have a plant that's not being properly fruitful, a section of the vine that's dying, then you start stripping away, cutting off those branches and getting rid of them, right? Because they're not helpful. And that's what God's saying here. These aren't mine. They don't belong to me. They're not bringing forth any good fruit for me. So just start getting rid of them. Cut them away. They're getting nutrients that aren't helping them. For the house of the Lord and the house of Judah have been utterly treacherous to me, declares the Lord. They're, these two sections of Israel and Judah. There had been a civil war, and they were two separate nations now. Israel had already been carried away into captivity, and now it's getting close to Judah's time. And that is the idea of treachery, which is this, being a traitor. It's a really passionate feeling there. Verse 12, they have spoken falsely of the Lord. They have said, He will do nothing. No disaster will come upon us, nor shall we see the sword or famine. The prophets will become wind. The word is not in them. Thus shall it be done to them. Goodness, there's so much stuff here. They have spoken falsely of the Lord and have said. So people speaking falsely about what God teaches. I mean, oh my goodness, are you at all familiar with what society is saying these days? Christianity itself, as those who call themselves Christians, are often unable to acknowledge simple biblical truths. They're unwilling to look at what the Bible actually says and follow it, and we'll say that stuff's not of God. And we could talk about that for quite a while, but I guess have to move on. And catch this, what they're saying. They're saying, He will do nothing. They're saying, there's no judgment to be coming upon us. They're saying the things like Jeremiah was saying, that judgment is coming, you have to repent. They're saying, nope, He will do nothing. No disaster will come upon us, nor shall we see sword or famine. There is such an attitude, I believe, of pride in the United States of thinking that bad things just will never happen to us. I mean, I don't know. On one sense, we take every little thing and catastrophize it, as if every little thing is the end of the world. But I don't think many people actually have that much of a... I don't think most people realize how fragile in some ways our nation's status is. I mean, we are strong in many ways. I don't mean to say that, but to deny that. But, in this grand scheme of things, I think we feel entitled as if things just must inevitably get better. And no, they must not. Hopefully they do. But this is a rare gift we have in our nation, of the amount of prosperity we have, and it could be gone like that. And we're certainly not owed it. The prophets will become wind. So they were saying, no disaster will come upon them. We shan't see the sword or famine. No, not us. That would never happen to us. The prophets will become wind. They're talking about God's prophets. They're like empty. They don't have anything worthwhile. They're just wind. The word is not in them. They don't speak for God. Thus shall it be done to them, which is the idea of like all the judgments that Jeremiah and the true prophets were prophesying upon Judah. They're saying all that bad stuff's coming your way because you're the bad guys. So much to see here. This is a passage that speaks deeply to me and makes me concerned for my nation. So let's go back to the top again real quick. If you want big picture stuff here, run to and fro through the streets of Jerusalem, look and take note. Search your squares to see if you can find a man, one who does justice and seeks truth, that I may pardon her. If you need some encouragement in your life to do what's right, to stay away from what's wrong, to walk closely with God, that you may be used by Him, that you may enjoy His favor, think about the idea that you might be God might be looking at our nation or our group or our local area, whatever it is, maybe your family, and saying, if there was just one person here, I could spare judgment. You might be the difference between disaster coming to this nation and not. I mean, that's an actual thing that could happen. I don't know how God judges. I'm not pretending to know, but I know He's watching. Um, and I know He is taking things to account, and judgment does come. So, if you need some encouragement, keep that in mind. Yeah. So, anyway, pray for our nation. Pray for mercy. Pray for guidance. Pray that we all see the truth, whether that's what we currently think is the truth or not, that we be open to wherever God will lead us and soften our hearts to Him. Anyway, I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.